It was a quiet night in Jackson, Mississippi. The kind of night where everything seems still, calm, and full of promise. But then, the silence was shattered. A single gunshot pierced the air, echoing through the quiet streets. In the blink of an eye, everything changed. Inside a home once filled with love and laughter, a woman stood over her husband's lifeless body. Desperation filled her eyes as she frantically dialed 911. "Send help, please," she begged, her voice shaking as she began CPR on the man she once called her partner, the father of her future. But it was too late. Damon Reed, 33, was gone, and it all began with a single click. A simple Facebook message, a friend request, an innocent interaction that spiraled out of control. What started as trust, sharing everything, including passwords, became the unraveling of everything they had built. Damon had always believed in transparency. The passwords, the phones, the open access to everything. He thought it was a sign of their love and commitment. But sometimes, too much trust can turn into something else. A simple request, an unexpected message, a conversation hidden behind a screen. It became the breaking point, the thread that pulled their lives apart. Inside the house, the once shared space, with framed family photos on the walls and the aroma of half-finished dinner still hanging in the air. The life they'd built together was now destroyed in a moment of jealousy, anger, and a misunderstanding that could not be undone. Damon's discovery of that message would set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. The digital age had brought them together in ways they never thought would tear them apart. What started as a simple question, a digital curiosity, "Who is this?" turned into accusations. Accusations turned into an argument turned into violence. And in an instant, trust was shattered beyond repair. But here's the thing, it wasn't just about that one message. It wasn't even about that one night. This was about something much deeper, a relationship built on secrecy, on control, and on misunderstandings that had been growing for months, maybe even years. If you've ever wondered how small actions can spiral into irreversible consequences, this is the story for you. Hit subscribe because you won't want to miss how this tragic night unfolded. Damon Reed and Rashawn Wallace seemed like the perfect couple. At 33, Damon was a tech-savvy professional, always on top of his game. Rashawn, 30, a compassionate and hardworking nurse, dedicated her life to helping others heal. Together, they built a life in Jackson, Mississippi, a life that looked like it was made for Instagram. A beautiful home, a strong relationship, a shared future. They seemed like the embodiment of love and stability. To anyone who looked at them from the outside, they were a perfect match, the type of couple everyone envied. They shared everything, from their phones to their passwords. They believed in complete transparency. No secrets, no hidden corners of their lives. If you have nothing to hide, why keep it locked away? That was their motto. In a world where privacy often holds the key to keeping relationships intact, Damon and Rashawn took the opposite approach. They believed openness was the ultimate sign of their commitment. It was their way of saying, "We trust each other, fully and completely." They had each other's passwords to social media accounts, email, and even bank information. It was supposed to be the epitome of trust. Every password shared, every phone unlocked, was a sign of how close they were. This openness, they thought, would keep them safe, keep their relationship strong. But trust is a fragile thing. It's easy to say, "I trust you" when things are going well, when life is flowing smoothly. But what happens when one partner stumbles upon something unexpected? When one simple thing, an email, a message, a phone call, suddenly puts everything in question? Damon, for the most part, felt secure. His relationship with Rashawn felt like it was built to last. He had no reason to doubt her, no reason to question their future. But over time, small things began to stir inside him. His friends had started whispering, whispers about their relationship, about her privacy, about things that didn't quite add up. He brushed them off, chalking it up to jealousy or envy from people who didn't understand what they had. After all, he trusted Rashawn with everything. But could that be enough? One evening, Damon sat in the living room, the soft glow of his phone illuminating his face. His fingers hovered over the screen as he scrolled through Rashawn's Facebook, something he did out of habit, trust, or perhaps curiosity. They shared everything, after all. He'd never had reason to question her, but that night something felt off. There it was, a notification that caught his attention. A friend request from a name he didn't recognize. The user profile was sparse, just a few shared posts and no clear connection to their lives. Daman tapped on the profile, feeling an unsettling sensation creep up his spine. As he scrolled further, his heart skipped a beat. There were private messages, a conversation between Rashawn and this stranger, one that seemed intimate. Was it flirtatious? Casual? He couldn't tell. The words blurred together, but the impact was undeniable. A sinking feeling formed in his stomach. Why hadn't Rashawn told him about this? Was this the betrayal he feared? Daman stared at the screen, trying to make sense of the messages. Had she crossed a line? Was it all in his head? He had no clear answers, but a cloud of doubt had descended. His mind raced, and his hand trembled slightly as he set the phone down on the coffee table. A wave of frustration hit him. He could feel it, rising in his chest, bubbling to the surface. When Rashawn returned home from her shift, the tension was thick in the air. Daman had barely spoken a word to her all evening, and the silence was deafening. His thoughts were consumed by the message he had seen. The trust they'd built, the openness they'd shared, suddenly felt like it was all built on shaky ground. "What's wrong with you?" Rashawn asked as she walked into the living room, her eyes scanning the room, looking for answers. The usual warmth in her voice was gone, replaced with confusion. But when she saw Daman sitting there, his gaze fixed on her, she felt a chill. Something was wrong. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" Daman's voice was calm, too calm, but the frustration behind it was unmistakable. Rashawn froze. She hadn't expected this. She had no idea what he was talking about. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice betraying the unease she felt in her gut. She glanced over at the phone on the coffee table, the screen now dark. The friend request, the messages. "Who is he?" Daman demanded, his eyes narrowing. Rashawn's face went pale. She hadn't expected him to find out this way. It had been a simple conversation, nothing to hide. But as Daman's words rang through the air, she realized she couldn't just brush it off. I didn't think it was anything," Rashawn stammered. "It was just a message. Nothing serious. Just someone I used to know." But Daman's eyes didn't soften. He wasn't convinced. The doubt that had settled in his heart began to fester. His emotions were shifting from hurt to anger. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" he pressed, his voice rising. "Why keep it a secret?" "I didn't think it mattered," Rashawn said, her voice faltering. But the damage was done. She could see the distrust growing in Daman's eyes, the way his anger built with each word. "What else are you hiding, Rashawn?" Daman spat, his words sharp, cutting deeper than she expected. "What do you want from me?" Rashawn shouted, now defensive. "I'm not hiding anything. It's just a stupid message. You're blowing this out of proportion." But Daman wasn't listening anymore. The trust they had built, the foundation of their relationship, was slipping through his fingers. The argument, which had started as a simple question, was now escalating into something darker, something more dangerous. Rashawn's eyes widened as Daman stood up suddenly, his fists clenched at his sides. She had seen him angry before, but never like this. She tried to take a step back, sensing the dangerous shift in the air, but it was too late. The moment had passed. The shouting continued, both voices rising, until something in Daman snapped. In a split second, a conversation about a message spiraled into an uncontrollable confrontation. Rashawn tried to back away, but he closed the gap between them, pushing her into a corner. Everything moved too fast. What started as a heated exchange quickly became something darker. A misunderstanding had fueled the flames, and now emotions had taken over. There was no way out. In that moment, the love they once shared seemed to disappear. She backed into the corner, instinctively putting distance between herself and the man she had once loved. His eyes were wild, his fists clenched. "Stop! Please, just stop!" she pleaded, her voice shaky. But it was no use. The words seemed to have no impact. Daman took another step forward, his anger boiling over. Rashawn's mind raced as she thought back to the years of training she had as a nurse. She had seen countless people in pain, heard endless cries for help, but never had she faced a threat like this. She knew what danger looked like. She had been trained to assess situations, to remain calm in the face of chaos. But in that moment, she wasn't sure she could trust her own instincts. Her heart pounded harder in her chest. In a split second, she made a choice. Rashawn grabbed the gun from the drawer, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled it from its hiding place. It was registered, legal, and something she had kept in case of emergencies. But this wasn't the emergency she had ever imagined. With the gun in her hand, she aimed it toward Daman, her finger wrapped around the trigger. "Stop! Stay back!" she shouted, hoping, praying that the warning shot would be enough to end this. She pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot rang through the room like an explosion. The noise was deafening, but it didn't do what Rashawn had hoped. Daman didn't stop. He didn't flinch. His gaze didn't soften. Instead, he took another step forward, unfazed by the shot that had been fired as a warning. He kept coming. The rage in his eyes burned brighter than ever. In that moment, Rashawn's world began to collapse. The warning shot hadn't worked. Daman didn't listen. The fear that had been growing in her chest erupted into panic. She knew he wasn't stopping, and in the back of her mind, she understood that if he reached her, there was no telling what would happen next. A second shot rang out. The sound seemed to freeze the world around them. It wasn't just a noise. It was the breaking of everything they had once built together. The moment the bullet left the gun, Rashawn felt an overwhelming sense of finality. She knew it was too late for them. She knew deep down that the love they had shared was gone, shattered by a series of decisions and missteps. As the gunshot echoed through the room, Rashawn's body went cold. Daman's eyes locked with hers, but there was no turning back now. He crumpled to the floor, and the weight of what had just happened settled on her shoulders. The adrenaline that had kept her moving suddenly faded, and she was left with the horrible reality of the situation. She had acted out of fear. But now as she knelt beside him, the woman who once saved lives was the one who had taken one. The room was silent, save for the sound of her own breath, shallow and quick. Rashawn realized that there was no going back. The world had just changed forever, and in the quiet aftermath, she was left to face the consequences. Was it self-defense, or was there something darker beneath the surface? Rashawn dialed 911, her fingers trembling as the phone rang. "Please, send help," she said, her voice steady but barely masking the panic. "My husband, he's been shot. I need an ambulance. Please." She dropped the phone for a moment and quickly moved to Daman's side, beginning CPR. She could hear the 911 dispatcher's calm, authoritative voice in her ear, but her focus was entirely on him. She knew how to do this, how to save a life, but this was different. She had never imagined it would be her own husband lying before her, fighting for his life. "Push, release, push," she whispered to herself, the motions automatic. She was so used to this rhythm, had done it countless times in her nursing career, but this time it felt different. Every push felt like a futile attempt to bring him back. Her emotions were raw, and with each failed attempt to revive him, her hopes slipped further away. The operator counted in the background, but the minutes stretched on. Each second seemed to drag, and Rashawn's movement slowed as the reality of what had happened sank in. The blood pooling around Daman's body told her what her heart already knew. It was too late. The wail of sirens in the distance was a cruel reminder that she was no longer in control. When the paramedics finally arrived, they took over the CPR, their experienced hands moving in perfect sync. But it was clear. The time of death was announced quietly, 1:47 a.m. Rashawn, who had spent her life saving others, now found herself on the other side of the emergency room. Her husband's lifeless body lay just feet away, and the cold truth settled over her like a heavy blanket. She had never imagined a moment like this, never thought that her training could be twisted into something so devastating. The officers arrived shortly after, taking in the scene. They found the gun on the floor beside her, the room still in disarray. They spoke to Rashawn briefly, documenting every detail. Her calm, professional demeanor was now met with suspicion. How had this happened? Was it an accident, or was there more to the story? As the police started their investigation, it was clear that Rashawn, the nurse who had once saved countless lives, was now the one being scrutinized. The very woman who had been trusted to heal others was now facing an unimaginable reality. She was under investigation for the death of the man she once loved. They began with the digital evidence, the Facebook messages that sparked the argument, the friend request, the messages. What did they truly mean? Were they simply innocent exchanges, or did they hold the key to something much deeper and darker? Investigators quickly discovered that the relationship between Rashawn Wallace and Daman Reed was built on shared passwords, complete access to each other's digital lives. They had built their relationship on trust, but trust is fragile, and the more investigators uncovered, the clearer it became that something had gone horribly wrong. Was it that single message that sent Daman into a rage? Or was it a deeper, simmering tension that had been building for years? As the police dug deeper into their digital lives, they found that what had been intended as transparency was now a source of strain and control. What began as openness had morphed into surveillance, raising the question, did one simple message trigger this tragedy, or was it the culmination of years of emotional manipulation and blurred boundaries? The emotional fallout from the tragedy was immediate and shocking. Friends and family who had known Daman and Rashawn for years were stunned. To them, they were just another couple, one that seemed to have it all, a nurse and a tech worker, building a life together with love and mutual respect. But now their entire community was left questioning how a relationship, once built on trust, could unravel so violently. How had something that seemed so perfect become so dangerous? Rashawn, the nurse who had once saved lives, now found herself facing a far different reality, one of incarceration. In the blink of an eye, she was arrested, charged with murder, and placed under a $50,000 bond. The questions about whether this was true justice or a case of misunderstanding loomed large. Rashawn claimed that she acted in self-defense, fearing for her life in that final confrontation with Daman. But the jury found otherwise, and as the trial came to a close, Rashawn was sentenced to prison. The weight of the decision was overwhelming for her. She never intended to hurt the man she loved, but in a moment of fear and desperation, everything changed. This case forces us to confront just how fragile trust can be in relationships. One simple message, one misunderstanding, one moment of desperation, and a life was lost. It highlights the destructive power of secrecy, emotional manipulation, and control. In the digital age, where privacy is often compromised, how much do we truly know the people closest to us? The tragedy of Daman Reed's death raises the question, could this have been prevented? Could the relationship have been saved before it spiraled out of control? If Daman hadn't discovered that Facebook message, would things have played out differently? Or was this a time bomb waiting to explode? In this digital age where privacy and trust are often blurred, one simple click can change everything. If this story made you reflect on your own relationships, hit that like button and share your thoughts below. How much privacy do you believe is necessary in a relationship? How much do you trust the people around you? Let's talk about boundaries, trust, and the price of secrets. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, because this is just the beginning. We dig deep into real stories that explore human emotions, relationships, and the impact of our choices. Trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming next.